Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have our lovely guest, Alana, and she is an ENFP and a 4 in the Enneagram. So an ENFP leads with the dominant function, extroverted intuition, and Alana has a very unique take on extroverted intuition. So I thought maybe you'd share that to enlighten the audience.
I don't know if it's unique. Like, I agree with the general consensus of what extroverted intuition is. I just have something I would want to add to it. It's actually something I discussed with my INTP friend last year, I think, or maybe it was 2018. But is that the word abstract in the mathematical sense, like to abstract something in maths is to take it and then abstract it up a level so it can apply to other things, is I think a great way of describing how any operates, because you will be either read a theory or presented with a opinion or thought by someone else, and you take that thought and you abstract it up a level, and then you abstract it up another level and another level and another level until you can then apply it across tons of seemingly unconnected things. And then, like, when whatever holds true across all those possibilities is like how you work out what's true. Like, you don't know if it's true, but it's like you exhaust the possibilities to find out what seems the most correct. Or yeah, so I think that's a good way to explain a part of how NE operates.
It's like a giant leap of faith. So you take what they have and you put a leap of faith into this like larger thing that it fits into. And then you can like abstract it up a level and to even add it to this more interconnected thing too. So I think like intuition in general is interconnected ideas. Whereas like NI tries to like siphon it down, narrow it down, to boil it down to this consolidated understanding. Whereas like NE might be like abstracting it into an expansion. So you kind of take it up and you connect it to seemingly unrelated ideas, like Alana said so beautifully. And yeah, that's a really interesting way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I had a conversation with Denzel once, because both NI and NE can often, reach the same conclusion, but the way they go about it is very different. Like, NI, as you said, siphons down and also will go to the very like depth of something, but that one particular thing until it's like, okay, this is what holds true about it. Whereas it's not that NE, I kind of hate when people talk about NE's just surface level and never goes deep into anything. They do, but it's like a rapid of like dive into this, dive into that, dive into that, dive into that, and then what, when you bring all this together, is holding true.
That is so amazing. So it's like rapidly going into all the rabbit holes, and then you come out with a broader understanding of it. Whereas NI is like, NI is more likely to drill down on that one thing and to get it completely. Whereas NE is more like rapid fire, connect all the ideas.
In Typology, like unrelated to this, but you can kind of connect it. I would imagine N types in general, not that S types don't have this, but divergent thinking or lateral thinking is when like someone says something to you and your brain automatically, instead of, taking what they say to you and just talking it back face level, your brain will go to, oh, well, this connects to something I learned about capitalism. And in biology, I learned about this. And in philosophy, I learned about this. And now I have a completely different question. But like the ability to do that kind of connects to, I think, NE in a way.
Yeah, the trans-contextual thinking, the cross-contextual, taking an idea from philosophy, applying it to biology, and then connecting the two.
Yeah.
That's so amazing that you said lateral thinking. My ENFP friend, Shannon Welsh, she's writing an article about NE and lateral thinking. So that's cool. Like, you had a mindset there, so it's brilliant. I love it. So that's an amazing introduction into the extroverted thinking function. And today we'll be talking about Type 4, the Enneagram Type 4, otherwise known as the romantic or the bohemian in some places. Do you have anything to go off of that, Alana?
Classic stereotype of the struggling or starving artist, or like putting yourself through pain to then like create something beautiful, is a very Type 4 stereotype. I think it holds up with a lot of Type 4s. I definitely do that. And I think I associate with Type 4s. I mean, Type 4s are hated a lot by people because of the kind of the depressing type of the Enneagram. Like, and also have a self-absorbed tendency that if someone shares something to somehow make it about themselves, which, you know, that can be annoying. But I think core things for the type 4 is seeing beauty, and I don't mean beauty in the superficial sense. I more mean like the significant meaning behind things, or the beauty behind things in everything. Like, not just in when this girl wears a pretty pink dress. This girl wears a pretty pink dress and it complements all these things I know about her. And then this really morbid, horrible, dark thing happened. But isn't it beautiful how this person went through that? You know, like, and people go, I don't want to talk about that. That's horrible and terrifying. And you're there going, but can't you see the like beauty of this? Which I think is a very type 4 thing. And
That's
the classic,
wonderful.
like, unique kind of needing to feel special and valued and different to others. And you don't like feeling like you're just like everyone else.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is that where the personal significance comes from? Like feeling unique in a certain way, in a very compelling way?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for all type 4s, but for me, I've grown. I think a part of me developed my type 4 personality was when I was little. I was called weird often, so I kind of learned to embrace being the weird kid or the quirky, eccentric one instead of trying to fit in. So I developed a personality like, well, if I'm weird, I don't want to be like anyone else. I'm going to be better, or I'm going to be special. Like, and that develops there. And whether consciously or unconsciously, you'll start liking things that aren't mainstream. You'll start going down avenues that other people don't, because you want to have this
Yeah.
set identity that stands out from a crowd.
Yeah. And that translates to like the things that you wear and the things that you listen to, the people you
Mm.
hang around.
Mm.
That's so fascinating.
What's your Enneagram type, by the way?
Cat Passionate thinks I'm a 6, so I'll go with that.
Yeah.
For now.
Right.
But that's wonderful in the sense that you guys kind of pave the path to making the eccentric acceptable in your own way. So it's the thing is you normalize eccentricity and you
Mm.
make it like beautiful and make it so people accept it. So you kind of like push the weirdness into people's faces so then they get accustomed to it. But there's beauty in that because you're bringing something new, valuable, and something that could change someone's view on something. So in a way, I kind of see type 4s as this Japanese saying, when a piece of pottery breaks, the Japanese like to say that they put gold in between the cracks.
Yeah, I
And what
love
you
that.
and what you're describing sounds a lot like type 4s. They take the cracks in things and then they know that it's painful, but they create art out of it, so they fill it with gold. And I
Mm.
see the art that type 4s make, it's similar, comparable to filling in broken places with gold.
Mm. You know, I've known it's like starts with K, doesn't it? It's like Kyogi or something like that. I'm probably screwing it up massively, but I'm aware of that philosophy, like the Japanese philosophy of like when a bowl breaks, that you don't throw it away, you recreate it with gold, and it's more beautiful because of like the brokenness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and people, they normally want to forget about broken things, so they break a pot and they're like, "Oh, no," and they try to ignore that side of themselves, but the type 4 is like, "No, you have to go back there, and you have to process it completely, and you have to put those gold cracks."
yeah. I think one thing the 9 and the 4 shares in common is we're also usually incredibly non-judgmental, because we come at people from a place of like we've gone to our really flawed and ugly places. So when someone's telling us, oh, I made a mistake, or I don't like this about myself, we kind of sit there in the space with them. We're not automatically like, well, why would you do that? That's a horrible thing to do, like. Yeah, and 9s are kind of similar in being non-judgmental generally.
That's so great. So you hold space for people's darkness or their entirety of their being. And I wonder if because 4s explore their identity, they're more well acquainted with their entirety, and to know the entirety of, or maybe like, I don't know how to explain it. To know your entirety is to also dive into your darkness, and that they know that you have to hold space. If you want to see someone's entirety, you have to allow for that darkness. And maybe there's even that point of connection with someone's darkness, like you can relate to it and it's relatable.
I think a big way fours bond with each other and with people who aren't fours is when people are vulnerable and share the less flattering sides of themselves. You feel a lot stronger bond with someone if they're comfortable sharing that with you.
You wrote this amazing article on Type 4s that I'll link below, and
Yeah.
you said that one of the unique gifts of the Type 4 is wearing their faults on their sleeve. It's exposing the most ugly side of themselves and still coming across as utterly beautiful. And I think that's amazing. And
I'm just rolling my eyes at my own writing.
And you give people permission to do the same. You let them show their less flattering sides of themselves. And it still has a beauty to it, and that's what you know, so you let it exist.
I also think, and in some aspects this can be unhealthy, and in some ways this can be incredibly healthy. Fours have a tendency to own their flaws, and then because they've owned their flaws, like, you can't be mad at them. Like, well, I know I'm bad, so like it exempts me from your judgment, which isn't entirely fair, because just because you're aware of your failings doesn't mean, you know, you're exempt from improving on them or being held accountable, which I think unhealthy fours can fall into the tendency of just exposing everything wrong with them, being like, cool, that's that done. Like, I don't have to go any further. But yeah.
It seems like there's this, like, you have to radically accept the 4 in all of its authenticity. So it's like, if you love me, you gotta love the warts and all. Because that's like a huge part of you. Like, your darkness is a part of who you are. So there's this characteristic about 4s too, where they have that trait of envy when they're in an unhealthy state. So I was wondering if you could go a bit into Type 4s and their envy.
Yeah, Type 4 in envy is interesting for me because the core, like, it's not fear, what is it, the vice, I'm pretty sure, of being envy is something that originally made me wonder if I wasn't a Type 4, because on the surface level I didn't relate to envy. Like, I used to be in a music class at school, and there'd be these incredibly naturally talented singers and pianists, and I wasn't envious of them. I was just amazed by them. Like, I didn't go, oh, I wish I could do that. Like, I hate them. Like, I didn't relate to that envy side of things. But I think it took some, like, soul searching and other people pointing it out that, yeah, envy plagues me sometimes. Like, if someone else is getting all this special attention from a person that I consider, like, close to me, it's like, hold up, why am I not the focus of their attention? Like,
It's like,
what's
hold
so
up.
special about this other person? Like, a competitive kind of enviness comes out, and it's also ties into envy, just speaking of Type 4s generally, that I'm losing my train of thought. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, that they think their life is lacking, and it's not necessarily that they think everyone's life is better than theirs, but they just see, like, oh, I've been alone for 3 years, all my friends are in relationships, I must be seriously lacking something in myself. Why am I not lovable? Like, is there something inferior to me to others? Like, there's this constant search of pulling something into their identity that will make them more desirable, and then, you know, the growth of the Type 4 is realizing that there's nothing wrong with you. Like, yeah.
That is so fascinating. It's like maybe Type 4s feel fundamentally flawed, or like there's a flaw so fundamental in core to them, something that they're lacking so fundamentally that they might experience envy because they see someone who doesn't have that lack that they perceive to not have that lack, and maybe they want some of that. Or
Yeah. You know, Beatrice Chestnut, that's her name, right? In this book, talks about, I mean, I'm not going to read freaking paragraphs from this book. But she talks about, like, this whole process, the fundamental belief that you're flawed and there's something wrong with you. An interesting thing, actually, I could just pull up, is this little, like, diagram here.
That is so fascinating. True higher self.
Yeah, so your personality, which is like your lower cognitive, your fixation in your brain, your lower emotional passion or vice, which is the envy. And then you have the 3 subtypes, so social, sexual, and self-preservation. And then like the growth out of your, what she calls your acorn self, into your oak tree or your true higher self, is the higher cognitive, the holy idea, the higher emotional virtue, which to get out of envy is equanimity. And then the pure instinct, which I think is just, not entirely sure, but yeah. Yeah. By the way, I'm a SX4, so a sexual 4 dominant.
Sexual 4. Wow.
Yeah.
So what makes the sexual 4 different from the other 4s?
I mean, I'm not the giantest fan of Beatrice Chestnut's description, because she paints an SX4 as just wanting to cause others pain, and I'm not like that. For 99% of the time, I don't want others to suffer. But I think a big difference between the sexual 4 and the SP4 and the SO4 is SX4s are very, I would say, the most intense 4. The energy is very focused and intense, and because of SX, or sometimes called one-on-one, you become very fixated on people. You become very like infatuated with a special someone, and you want them to see you as special and you to be the like only thing that they see in the room. Also, SX4s are considered the most 8ish-like, because they have a competitive streak. You know, SP4 might hide their envy, might hide their pain and suffer in silence, and then want to be seen as strong and resilient. And SO4 is more likely to put all their pain in the world and go, poor me, someone come take care of me. And SX4 is more likely to see someone like threatening their specialness and get competitive unconsciously often, like just start doing things to seem more unique or more better or more appealing than this person that they feel threatened by. And I'd say that differentiates them.
That was really well said.
You keep telling me things so well said. I'm like, I'm an ENFP. I'm supposed to be all over the place.
No,
maybe I'm mistyped.
No, it's great. I find with some ENFPs, they have like really great TE. So what happens is that they can explain concepts really well because they're able to like TE organize it in their brain. But they're still all over the place, but they have that TE honed in, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I'm also a 4-wing 5, so I think my 5-wing affects how I speak. Like I research a lot and hoard a lot of information. So when people ask me things, I've got set things often in my head that I just know.
Well, that is great. If anyone wants to come to you and learn about a random thing, you're their gal.
Yeah, I probably know something about what you're asking.
You're like a mini expert with like a plethora of many things. A jack of all trades with information.
Jack of all trades, master of none is the curse of my life.
That's wonderful. You you also mentioned this really great point in your article that you wrote is like the beauty of type 4s is their young and old spirit often waltzing together hand in hand. And I was like, that's such a really nice imagery of like the old part of you, so the wise part of you waltzing with that youthful part of you. And that like, so I think with type 4s, they kind of like delve into their human experience. And I think the way you wrote that is really encapsulating of how it feels like to dive into the human experience. So maybe I thought you could go a little bit into that.
I think what I see in other type 4s and in myself is a person who's like, people often ignore the happy side of a type 4 because we're so dark and melancholic and all that. But type 4s can have this very youthful, I mean, this might be me biased because of my ENFP-ness and just how I am, but have a very youthful and are in awe of the world around them. You know, they want to recreate the world around them through art. They find everything beautiful and they have this youthful spirit to them. But at the same time, they can be very cynical and old and wise, and you know, you ask them about something and they'll immediately just be like, well, the world's screwed and look at this and look at this. And they're together at the same time. It's this like yin yang of old and new kind of in a type 4, I think.
that's what makes them deep. So you see one side of them. You shouldn't define them so quickly off of what you see because they have the exact opposite in them too. So I
Mm.
think like type 4s, they feel misunderstood because they have paradoxical sides. So you just talked about how they have a young side or an old side. I bet like type 4s have a paradox of identity. So they have a part of them that is seen as happy or joyful, but a part of them that is cynical and sees the world as dark. And these parts can exist together, but people tend to see one and define you solely by that one. And it's like, well, you're misunderstanding me because you're missing out on a big part of my
I think a
personality.
big part of just like the archetype of a type 4 or what people learn from type 4s is that your first assumptions are often wrong.
Yes.
Like I know people say trust your like first assumptions and gut instinct of someone, but there's always so many layers and so much context to when you first meet a person and why they are like they are. And I think a type 4 is exemplifies that people's identity are complex, and you shouldn't you know if you really want to understand someone, you need to approach them with this non-judgmental mind.
I love how you talked about like the complex identities, how the identity is complex. And I
Mm.
think that's why you told me before that you don't like to like label things because you see identity as complex. So I asked you like, so what would you name this? And you were like, well, and maybe it's just a mute thing, but I wouldn't name it anything because it's kind of you water down its complexity when you name it something that
Yeah.
makes
I
it
mean, I
one
think
dimensional.
the beauty of the Enneagram and the fact that they're numbers is there's no words or thing attached to them. Numbers are very, abstract in a way. You don't feel like, oh, I wish I was a 7. Whereas, like, you might read thinker, intuitive, and go, oh, I wish I was an NT. They're the smart, intuitive ones, like I'm a SF and I'm just feeling and sensing and I feel stupid because the internet makes me feel stupid, but when they're not, obviously. But I think, yeah, not that nicknames for the types in Enneagram are wrong, because it often helps people jog their memory to what a type is. But I just like think of the types as their numbers, because then you're not, restricting it.
Yeah, labels can almost be restricting in a sense. It makes it easy to stereotype it in a way that's untrue
Mm.
to its core essence.
I mean, something I learned in psychology is like there's nothing wrong with stereotypes in themselves. It is human nature when you meet someone to your brain immediately makes a million assumptions, because that's how you
Yes.
tell if someone's friendly, if they're non-friendly, but like the closer and more you spend time with people, and this comes into like how you stop racists from being racist and sexist from being sexist, is the more you're exposed to different people and the more you spend time with them, then the more the stereotypes, wear off. So yeah.
That's so true. Yeah, so it's like your brain is hardwired to find generalizations and things, but it's all about having flexible generalizations. So it's allowing for the complexity of the person to be added into your understanding of them instead of stopping at that assumption.
Sorry about that. My sister knocked on
Oh,
the
it's
door.
totally okay.
And then she's like,
Yes.
"You're acting weird. What's going on?" I was like, "Nothing."
No worries. I have editing magic. It'll go like poof. So, just to give everyone a brief overview of the type 4. So, the type 4's core desire is to have personal significance. So, it's to
Mhm.
create an identity that is very satisfying to them internally. A type 4's core fear is to not have personal significance, to be a
Yeah,
no one,
to
to
be
not matter.
insignificant or lacking an
Yeah,
identity. Yep.
absolutely. Yeah. So these things drive the 4.
Yeah. Actually, we could probably quickly touch on, because Cat Passionate recently mentioned it in a good Enneagram thread she did on often when you're doing Enneagram, it's not always the type you most relate to that's your type. It's a useful way to work out is the coping mechanisms. What coping mechanisms have you developed throughout your life to cope with your fear, and what's developed your personality? And sometimes the type you relate to, you might not be your type because you don't use their coping mechanisms. Whereas I definitely have type 4's coping mechanism of introjection, which
Yes,
is, I mean, I should probably look up a thread because she'll explain parts of it better than I do. But
for sure.
like, introjection for me is I find it very hard when someone tells me something about myself, especially if it's negative, to not internalize that and see that as part of my identity. You know, someone told you can I say bitch on your channel?
Sure. It's,
If
it's type
someone
4
says
edition, sassy.
you're this selfish bitch, a person who was like, I don't know, maybe an 8 would brush it aside and be like, I know I'm not. I find it very hard to not delve into that and go, well, why are they thinking that? And then when I can find all these reasons why I am selfish and I am a bit of a bitch or whatever, then that kind of internalizes. And yeah, that's like, I think a coping mechanism kind of happens. Like, you interject things into your personality. I mean, I'm not entirely sure why. I'd have to look at what Kat said, but I think part of it is to just cope with the world and your complex identity, that you just take in what people are saying and you keep delving deeper into it, even if it's not healthy for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you internalize it and you make it a part of you. So it's that identity thing too, by accident?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not always good, because then you have people who are perceiving you not as your authentic self, and you're internalizing their opinion of you. So yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. So you could like type 4s might actually might accidentally make a false negative self-identity based off what other people say about them because they take it too personally. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like someone says something like you said earlier, like putting you down a notch, and you kind of you might accidentally take it to heart and then form a base off of that because it kind of validates your assumption that you are lacking something deeply necessary. So things that validate your assumption that you are fundamentally flawed in some way, like there's a slight chance that you might accidentally internalize it and introject. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Introjection.
That's so cool. I'd love to learn more about that. So I'll let you pull up Kat's thread.
Yeah, I'll do that. If you want to keep talking, I'll try to find it. I think I found it. So she said a couple of things about self-typing Enneagram and why it can be difficult. The fears/desires, etc., are meant to be unconscious. It's not about going and reading things and seeing what you consciously relate to or what you consciously fear the most. You have to go deeper. What's a good way to see what type you are a bit beyond your ego? Respective defense mechanisms. If you didn't have the fear, you wouldn't constantly be using the defense mechanism. So while your ego might tell you, I don't fear this, your defense mechanisms are saying otherwise. You would not need to use a specific tactic if you are not trying to heal a wound or fear. And if I just skip to the 4, she said interjection. Oh yeah, these are the other parts of interjection that I always forget. Amplifying feelings to feel more profound in order to avoid being ordinary. Seek emotional value in all things. And then I asked her if it's also internalizing what others say, and she said that's also a big part of the 4. So yeah, that's probably a
Wow.
whole lot of dump of information.
I love that method of typing through coping mechanisms, so you don't bias yourself which description you relate most to, because it's the
Yeah,
coping
no,
mechanism
same.
that
Because
makes
I
the type.
think if I went out and went what fear out of all the types that were most prevalent for my life, it wouldn't be type 4s. It would be type 8s, and I'm not a type 8, but I have a prevailing fear of not wanting to be controlled by others and needing freedom and not to be restricted, and that would probably be the strongest thing throughout my life. But I don't use type 8 coping mechanisms, and I'm very much a 4. So yeah.
That is fascinating. What about being ordinary doesn't appeal to you?
um I'll say the healthier I've gotten over my life, the more the ordinary is just as special to me and beautiful. But before I reached this perspective, and even still now, being just like everyone else kind of links into my aversion to, you know, organizations or corporations or uniformity, when everyone looks the same, when everyone gets plastic surgery to look the same, and everyone wears the same things, and everyone thinks the same like plastic thoughts, and it's repulsive. It's like, why would I want to be just like everyone else? Like, why? I want to be different and have, you know, my own personal significance, because otherwise we're all just walking copies of each other, and that's not a very interesting world.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if it links to your NE too, because you're like your NE is like it wants to look for that new and interesting, and people are just like carbon copies of each other after a point, certain point.
Yeah, I mean,
Like this.
obviously, I try very hard when I see someone who looks like a very carbon copy, basic copy of something I've seen a million times. I try hard to not automatically rule them off. Like, there's so much more to every person, but sometimes you have conversations with people and you're like, I just feel like I'm reading some quote from some trashy internet blog, and I'm just like, what personality do you have? Like, I can be quite judgmental at times, but I keep it to myself.
Yeah, when you go into someone's house and you see like hung up on the walls, live, laugh, love, and you're like, your type
Classic, like, sports mum and their like little jacket, bleach blonde hair to like cut to hair with their 3 kids, and they're like live, laugh, love, and they all talk about the same thing, and you're like, what is going on? Yeah.
Oh my. My ENFP friend, she calls it sheeple. It's like you see all these people, they're like sheeps. Like they follow the mass and they
Yeah.
just go with what everyone says. They don't like have their own thoughts. They're kind of like just sheep and herding with others. And you have this cool concept, Alana, of absurd nihilism or something about happy nihilism that I
All
thought
right,
was
yeah. I
really
mean, it's not my concept at all. I didn't come up with it, but my favorite philosopher currently, anyway, is Albert Camus, who's a French philosopher around the 1950s onwards. And he is most famous for his philosophy of absurdism, which is people jokingly nickname it happy nihilism, because it is on the fundamental belief still that, you know, life is inherently meaningless. There's no special significance to you or the universe. It just is. Chaotic things happened, and here we are. Like, but unlike nihilism, which people often take to mean, well, if the world's meaningless, I can do what I want. If the world's meaningless, why should I live? Like all these depressing things. He kind of said, well, the world's absurd and so many things are unexplainable, but that shouldn't make it a bad place to be in. Like, you should embrace that absurdity. You should strive to put meaning into things that are important to you, because, you know, what else are you going to do with your life? You're just going to live a very depressing, hollow life if you don't. And I can probably bring up what started this. Is he took the myth of syphilis. I think syphilis is a sexually transmitted disease. I think it's syphilis or something, which is this Greek myth of this, I think he was immortal, who the gods punished and made to roll up this giant boulder up a hill, and every time the boulder got to the top, it would roll back down, and he had to do this again and again for eternity, and this was the gods' punishment. And Camus' like extraordinary idea or controversial idea was to imagine Sisyphus happy. And everyone's like, how can you be happy? Your whole life is rolling this boulder up a hill, just have it roll down again, or the gods laugh at you. Like, and his philosophy was, well, imagine like he finds fulfillment in every time he rolls this boulder up the hill, every time he's getting stronger, every time he sees something new, and life is full of these ups and downs, and, you know, it's better to laugh back at the gods and go, I'm enjoying this punishment you gave me, than to like submit to it. And that's kind of absurdism, which is kind of the philosophy I most align with.
That's a really like freeing way to see nihilism. It's like, well, if it's all meaningless anyway, might as well be free in that and be happy in that and like embrace it and make something, like bring a positive spin on it. Or even it's like so funny that like it's so like absurd. Like being alive is so absurd that it's almost laughable.
It's very weird to think about the fact that you're here because some sperm hit an egg at the exact right time of the world, and you happen to be on a planet that can like sustain life. Like, the fact that you're here is such a bizarre thing to think about at any length of time.
Are there more facets to this philosophy? Like, what about it is comforting, and what about it do you like the most? What speaks to you?
There's tons more to it, but I haven't actually read enough of Camus to be an expert on it. But what I find, I guess, comforting about it is because I think I already kind of thought that way before I came across the philosophy myself. So it was very validating. Like, my whole, like, as I came to think more about the world, I mean, I don't believe in God, I'm an atheist, and I saw the world as this beautiful thing that it just happened by chance. And people go, well, it can't, happen by chance because, oh, look at all this, it must have been designed. But it's failing to see that, like, that chance is one in like a million. Like, things were constantly interacting, and then one spark caused the Big Bang, and that's continuing to happen. Who knows, another universe might, occur without us knowing. But and I just looked at life when people have their very, very set ideas of how the world works, and this is what this is. Like, how do we even know an atom is an atom? Like, we fundamentally accept things were taught to us because we'd go insane if we didn't have a way to see the world. But I think I always get to a point when people are very strict on what they believe and think that I'm just like, you can't know. Life is absurd, and we only know what we can comprehend. And I kind of, instead of that terrifying me, embrace that and get excited by it. And so that, I think, with absurdism is what comforts me. I feel like I'm talking heaps.
No, I bet it's comforting to someone in the audience too. So it's good that you shared this because it probably will resonate with other people who've thought this. So feel free to talk. You mentioned this thought before. I watched your live stream with Denzel before. You talked about,
did you? Okay.
yeah, it was lovely. And you talked about if it seems like if God was a cockroach, and I thought it was the most extroverted intuition thing ever. Because I feel like with my ENFP friend, she'll go into dinner with her family and she'll go like, so the death penalty, or like she'll say like something very inappropriate because like she wants to know people's opinions and mix up the pot. It's like, hey guys, this totally
it's very
socially taboo.
And ENFP to just slide and be like, I know we're having a nice, comfortable chat, but what are your opinions on the death penalty?
Yeah. Chaos monkeys, y'all.
Yeah.
So with that thought, do you remember your rationale for that?
Kind of. I think I was trying to explain how human beings are very egotistical. Like, the fact that all our gods are humans, or depictions like humans, and that, God created us as this special, elevated above other species, in his image. Like, and then I sat there, my mind went to a weird any place, and I was like, cockroaches survived 2 like atomic bombings and wars when humans died. Cockroaches breed. Like, if you see one, there's another 20. Like, it's hard to kill a cockroach. They're probably the most surviving species over the world. If you look at like that, wouldn't you then conceive from that cockroaches are the most valued by a god? Because, I mean, we're dying all the time and cockroaches are thriving. Like, what if God's a cockroach? And then, obviously, that sounds ridiculous, but it only sounds ridiculous because we have such a giant ego that we assume God would be in our image or us in his image, I mean, because I'm atheist, I believe we made God in our image, not that we're made in God's image. So
I'm so sorry to anyone who got offended in the audience from that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But I think it illustrates extroverted intuition with some ENFPs really well, because sometimes they'll say something that is completely socially unacceptable, but it's only socially unacceptable because for like some social reasons, like we can't go there. But I feel like extroverted intuition takes off the lid with that, and they go to places that are taboo to some people. Like they go to thoughts that are taboo to some people, but it's almost like there's an intellectual freedom in that. So I'm wondering, with you, you said that you like to like explore the taboo and stuff, and I want to go into that. And I'm like, so specific taboo things do you like to go into?
We're gonna open up a whole can of like making people uncomfortable, offending people. But big taboo things, and then I mean a major one that a lot of people don't like me for, and then a lot of people like me for, is I'm incredibly comfortable talking about sex, or things relating to sex, things relating to the periods, and things that are considered gross about women or men. And yeah, if you follow me, you're just gonna read things you probably don't want to read. But I just have a mindset that the idea that things are blocked off is almost limiting your freedom of thought, let alone your freedom of speech, to not allow to even think and ponder things because that's wrong or sinful or filthy or whatever is bothers me. So I very adamantly just choose to do it anyway. So yeah, questioning God, questioning why we're here, questioning sexuality, all the things that you're supposed to have a degree of what's the word? You don't have to not speak about it, but you've got to be super sensitive. I can sometimes be very insensitive, which isn't a good thing, but my mind races really fast when I say something and people are like, whoa, and I'm like, oh no, crossed the line. But yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question. And like it's really cool. It exemplifies the EP boundary crossing, the rebelness of the EP. It's like, oh, you people put up artificial boundaries for themselves and the EP notices and it's like this is an artificial boundary. You can literally just put your foot over and you can go right across. And then it's
Yeah.
like showing people like, guys, just walk across. It's not a real boundary. You can actually talk about this. With ENFPs, if they don't see why they shouldn't talk about it, they're like, well, then it's okay to talk about it unless you tell
Yeah.
me why I shouldn't. Because if
I
there's
mean,
no why,
sometimes
then
I've talked about things that I probably shouldn't have in the way I did, and it's not until someone's explained it to me afterwards that I've gone, oh, I mean, maybe that was an artificial boundary that should have been respected, you know?
yes.
But yeah, I think it's very ENFP, and I'm sure lots of types do this depending on just who you are as a person. But yeah, to see all these boundaries that society puts up, I mean, an automatic. It's why I like philosophy. It's why philosophy is my favorite thing. It's my automatic thing. When anyone tells me anything, is why. And so if someone says you can't do this, can't talk about this, I want to know why. And if their explanation doesn't seem sufficient, then I will ignore that. And that's how my brain operates a lot of the time. Unless obviously I'm going to get in serious trouble or it affects my life, I disregard some rules in society.
Well, it causes evolution, you know, to go because sometimes they aren't reasonable, but sometimes they are. So sometimes, you know, there's that issue.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it, but that was really well said, Alana. I think this might also be a point where like type 4s feel misunderstood is because they talk about the taboo, they can go into places where other people are uncomfortable. And people have a lot of automatic assumptions that someone who crosses that boundary is obviously blank, but it's not. Maybe it's just someone who wants to see and the boundary for itself and understand it. But like the thing is, people jump to automatic conclusions, and it's wrong. But type 4s like to cross boundaries because they want to. I don't know. It's kind of like that's a part of the uniqueness too. Because if you don't cross boundaries, then how are you unique? You're just carbon copy.
You're fitting
So
in the cardboard cutout.
cardboard cutout, yeah, just smiling perpetually in a cardboard cutout.
I'm a great mix being an ENFP and a 4. I feel like I'm the very definition of breaking taboos. Not only do I have any that's like, woo, I also have type 4 that's like, now let's go in this incredibly dark direction.
Yeah. Like if a tsunami met a tornado and they became friends.
It's
Yeah. But there's a
me.
beauty to that because it's like it's kind of like people all have darkness inside them, whether or not they admit to it. It's just that you are hyper aware of that and you delve into that. So you're kind of a part of the human psyche that people neglect to look at because it is too painful or they're not ready to look into that. So I think in some ways the type 4 is more well equipped to go deep diving. So, scuba diving. So they deep dive into the psyche. When people go 50 meters underwater, the type 4 will go to the very depths of the ocean. I don't know how far the ocean goes. I'm just gonna throw a random
No
number
one
out there.
does. We have explored more of space than our own ocean, and it terrifies me.
Is that for real? Okay,
Yeah,
so I
we
guess
don't we've gone to depths of parts of the ocean, but we literally don't know how far the ocean goes, and we've explored more of space than our own ocean.
that is really fascinating.
Yeah.
So the type 4, they have a submarine that can go to the very depths of the ocean. Let's put a random number out there, 10 million thousand meters down. And everyone else's equipment breaks before they get there, so they can never reach that depth.
That's
But
a
the
good
type
metaphor that your equipment breaks, because it implies that all types can do it, but they'll hit a point where it's too much and they come back up for air.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
the type 4's submarine
That's
is made
actually
out
a lyric almost in the Enneagram song. Hold up, I'm gonna find it. Keep talking.
Oh, for sure. So it's like their submarine, the type 4, is made out of diamonds or platinum, like the strongest material to Earth. I don't know what that is, but so they're able to stay in that dark place. They have a higher tolerance.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lyric that I've always really resonated in this song.
Yeah.
Here, I'm stuck swimming in shadows down here. It's been forever since I came up for air, flashlight in hand, determined to find authenticity only poetry could even begin to try to describe.
Wow.
Yeah,
I love Sleeping at Last.
I
They have
know.
great Enneagram
They're
songs.
the precious band. I love them dearly. There's a main guy who runs it, I'm pretty sure, but yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So I have a question for you.
Mm.
Has there ever been a time in your life where you've fallen for the carbon copy version of a person? Or are you just completely against it? Or are you like bittersweet? Do you have a push and pull with it?
You mean have I fallen for someone who's carbon copy, or have I become like a carbon copy person?
Both.
Both. I'm more likely to have become a carbon copy myself than ever fallen for someone who's carbon copy, because I'm very attracted to people who are unconventional. So I don't think I've ever been attracted to your basic boy or girl or the normie or whatever. But yeah, I'm sure I've had times in my life where I've just come across as the ditzy blonde from high school who, goes to parties and is academically okay. Like, I've for sure fitted into stereotypes, but I think the more you get to know me, those stereotypes become apparently, less who I am.
Interesting. That's fascinating. And I wanted to dig a little deeper into the psyche. So, where does the type 4, assuming that it is broken or like inherently deficient in some way, come from? Like, where did that start out?
Oh, Beatrice Chestnut talks about that. I mean, all things of type 4 start with wounds from your childhood. So either something in your childhood legit did cause it, or you have a perceived trauma from your childhood, whether it's true or not. And type 4s come from not feeling like they can ever relate to core people in their family or their life. And so they learned very quickly to embrace their differences because there's no one around them reflecting it back to them. And I mean, I struggled a little because I had a very strong connection with my mum as a kid, and type 4 descriptions are you didn't feel particularly close to either parent, so it's not entirely true for me. But definitely the more I grew up, the more and more I couldn't see myself in my mum, the more and more I developed my own personality. By the way, my mum's an INFJ one wing too.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
So,
so
is ENFP, INFJ the golden pairing or nope? Like with your mom
I
and you,
mean,
like
if you know me, I personally think INTJs are the gift from God. So the INFJs are up there. I mean, NI is probably my favorite cognitive function. So INFJs and INTJs are like a drug to me at times. Like, for my mum, it's really useful in that we get along and understand each other on a lot deeper level than I do with my sister or dad. My sister's ESTJ and my dad's ISTJ. But I clash with mum probably more from a auxiliary FE, auxiliary FI, and a 1 versus 4 place. She's very stubborn about her opinions and things, and I won't just agree anymore like I did when I was a kid. So we can get very clashy on things at times. And she also has a very FE way that drives me nuts with like I mean, I don't want to attribute this to FE, but a kind of passive aggressive, like, I did all these things for you and you're not appreciating it. And I'm just like, but ultimately, I think INFJs and ENFPs work very, very well together. Yeah.
Yeah. Heidi Pareeb's best friend, one of them is an INFJ.
Yeah. I don't have
Yeah.
a best friend anymore who's INFJ, but I used to have a very close friend in high school who was.
You can always talk to me and maybe we'll be friends like that. We'll be tight. Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. So another topic I thought I might bring up today is, so you mentioned like feeling misunderstood, and I was like, so what part of you feels the most misunderstood? Like which area of you?
I think often what I'm most misunderstood for. I mean, I don't know why people misunderstand it because I'm pretty open and honest, but often things I say get twisted or people completely read wrong into what I'm saying. And I've had many misunderstandings in my life where people have these whole conceived ideas of me that I'm like, that's just not who I am. Like, how did this happen? And some of it probably comes with I'm a bit loose in how I talk, and like I don't care so much about my word choices on things. Like a TI dominant might be. So people can easily take what I say and be like, well, this means this when it didn't. So I'd say I feel most misunderstood and people just get the wrong idea about me off the bat.
Yeah.
That would be the biggest misunderstanding.
Yeah. It's like your unconventionalness, like the things that make you unconventional make people misunderstand you. But it's like, what can you do? It's like you don't want to be like normal. So, but that subjects you to other people constantly misunderstanding you.
Yeah, I
Because,
mean, I think I just over time have learned to be more careful of how I word things or to not say things altogether, which sometimes is sad. But I mean, I've suffered fucking drama on Twitter from misunderstandings and accounts blocking me and la sob story, and it's just like, yeah, I've learned that people aren't gonna. I mean, especially on Twitter, there's character limits. It's hard to have nuance on there. So I kind of just accept that people will see me how they want to see me, and you just do you.
yeah. And the thing is, I guess like not everyone is a perceiver dom, so they won't have like that tolerance to think about your opinion, but to look beyond like how it immediately appears to like then process it completely, like perceive it completely. And so ENFPs, or maybe it's a you thing too, but it's like they're constantly having their like misunderstood because people don't take the time to adequately understand where they're coming from. Because ENFPs, they tend to present like really controversial opinions, or like if they don't agree, like they don't have FE, so they're gonna go like, well, this, and then it's like, whoa.
People are like, whoa. There was no FE buffering at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it can be tough because it's like, well, that's not what I meant, but you can take it that way. Oh well. It's like I can't control your perception. Um, but I wonder if is there ever darkness created from that? Like from people not misunderstanding you? I mean, from people misunderstanding you. Do you develop beliefs off of that? Like maybe there's no one who will understand me.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, just to throw this in to add context, I have bipolar type 2 disorder, and in the states where I'm manic or depressed, certain parts of myself that aren't really true to myself come out, because of how my brain is being chemically overloaded with either depressed chemicals or manic chemicals, and however that works. But I've had times where am I going with this? Why people misunderstanding me cause darkness. Yeah, I've had times in states where I've had really low self-esteem, especially in depressive states, or looking back at things I did while manic that I regret, that is so easy to internalize what people thought about you and said about you, because some of it's true. Like in those states, I did do and say those things. So then you're like, well, I'm a terrible person. Like, and it's like I have a lot of self-esteem issues that I need to work through. So yeah, definitely misunderstandings can create a negative self-image very easily.
Yeah. Wow. And wow. That gives me like sympathies to like you and like to type fours and to people in general. And it's like so ENFPs, they're also called the sad clowns. So ENFPs, they can look very bubbly and like
Yeah.
sociable or happy, but sometimes there's that sad clown aspect where there's this darkness within them, and it's extremely dark. But they want to give that side to the people they trust or to like some certain places that they relegate it to because they know off the bat that most people won't understand it. So it's kind of like they appear like happy, but inside there might be this torment that they're also dealing with beneath the surface. So it's like the sad clown type of thing.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that with lots of
Yeah.
ENFPs. Actually, a funny thing is, I was probably more like that in high school. I think in my how old I am now, I'm a bit more forefront about my sadness. You know, I don't always try to hide it. But in high school, we once were at a sleepover, a whole group of my friends, and we all went around and wrote things that we liked about the other on a note. And my INTP friend Nick at the time, so one compliment was, I love that you can be literally struggling and sad and no one knows. Everyone thinks you're happy. Like the fact that you can like so genuinely put that on. And I was like, thanks. Like, it's not even always conscious. It's just, why would I drag everyone down to my problems around me when we're all trying to have a fun time at a sleepover? Like, you know? Yeah. So yeah, sad clown is I've never heard that before, but yeah, that works.
It's yeah, it's like a thing. You know, Robin Williams was probably an ENFP and
Yeah.
he had a pretty sad fate, but he to other people he seemed happy, but
Mm.
probably he was struggling with something very deep inside.
I
Like
think a
the
really
ENF
big truth about comedians too is that the reason they're so funny is because they've looked at some really dark stuff and made light of it. And so like people like Robin Williams who are battling his own demons, and everyone just saw this crazy funny person. It's not untrue. He is hilarious, but that doesn't mean that there was all this, you know, torment and struggle behind it. And I think if someone sees, especially if you're successful and funny, then why would you be sad and have all these problems? Like people are very quick to judge.
Yeah, it's like people have dichotomy thinking. They're like, "Oh, you're successful and famous, then you're probably happy." So it's this dichotomous thinking, or like, you know, so it's they're creating false boundaries, like our conversation earlier. So
Mm.
then, like he probably didn't have a space. Like Robin Williams didn't have a space where he could talk about that type of thing because people already assume off the bat if you're famous and successful, like why would you be sad? And it's just hard to bring up those topics. And something you brought up earlier, Alana, made me think something. You talked about how like you feel misunderstood because people like they don't get your ideas sometimes and they twist it in some way, in a way that you didn't intend. And I'm like, wow, I bet like I wonder how many ENFPs like they're missing closeness with people because if people don't understand fundamentally how you view reality, like they can't even comprehend the ideas that you say out loud, how can you possibly even feel close to anyone? And I'm thinking like because you're an SX Dom, like that's so important to you. You're like, I
Mm.
want to feel close to people and I want to feel that intensity. But there's that big block because it's like they can't even understand your ideas. So it's like that's a barrier to closeness because it's like I want to feel close to you deeply. But a part of it's so hard because y'all just misunderstand everything I have to say. So I feel like there's this distance because there's this distance. Sorry, my English. There's this distance between my thought and your thought, and as an intuitive, like your ideas are like real to you in a sense that like they they make up a big part of who you are. Like, you spend a lot of time ideating, and it's like for someone to not understand the like how you think, or like how you process things and how you conceive of reality, or the abstract part of you, it can be isolating, and it can take away a feeling of closeness, and it can kind of make you feel a little insane, and it can kind of like I don't know, like as an SX dom, I can only imagine how deprived of intimacy that would feel like, to have people constantly misunderstand your perception, because it's like I don't feel close to how people like relate to my ideas, in the sense that like they're far away from my mind. So how can I feel close to people when everyone feels far away from my mind?
Yeah, I
And
think
so
as an Essex Dom, the older I get, the less and less friends I have. Because I not in a sad way, more in a I latch on to a very specific few people who I feel like understand me, and if they don't, are very willing to listen until they do. And so the people that I'm extremely close to in my life is because of that. And everyone else who's a friend, and they are a friend, but they're at a distance, they're never going to see all of me, because I know that they're not either willing or just can't understand where I'm coming from. And that does put up a barrier to closeness. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. And I think something I relate to that maybe you might relate to is the phrase, "My mind feels lonely." So, like, for me, I tend to say ideas that people like, it kinda it's like I'm talking to a wall. Like, I'll say it, and it like, they're not able to communicate, like, to talk in the level that I need it to be for me to feel intellectually stimulated. So I feel like I'm constantly not intellectually stimulated. So it feels like my mind is lonely, and I'm always like I can be happy. Everything around me can be fine, but I always feel like my mind is lonely because no one is there to like to give my the I don't know how to explain it. It's like
Like
this
validation of your ideas.
validation to what I need to feel happy, which is my ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I relate to that. I don't know if I would conceive that my mind's lonely, because I almost I spend so much time in my own headspace that my mind's in company with itself. Like, you know what I mean? But I definitely have times when you feel like you're talking to a brick wall, or when the conversation's going nowhere. It's like, yep, I'm just alone in my mind then. Like, yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from, but I don't think I consciously think a lot of the time, oh, I'm lonely in my mind, because I'm quite happy in my own headspace.
Oh, that's interesting because I feel pained in my own mind.
Oh, sad. Yeah, I think any pain I would feel is quickly replaced by just me fantasizing or thinking of things.
That's nice. Can you sign
Yeah,
me up
I
for
think
that drug? Can you pump that into
it's
my arteries?
well, like part of being a four, fantasizing and daydreaming. Like, I can stare at a blank wall in my room for like 2 hours straight, just daydreaming a scenario. It's like that easy for me to entertain my mind.
That's fascinating. There's
Yeah.
okay, there's this clinical term called maladaptive daydreaming, which I don't think is actually clinical. I think I'm like, it sounds a little bit like intuition. I'm like, that's kind of offensive to intuitives.
Listeners with maladaptive cognitive functions, we should all be S types. People have like hold in and high regard. I'm like, what are we doing? S types run the whole world. We're just sitting here thinking.
Yeah, like with intuitives, it's like me and my cognition. They're buddies, and
Yeah.
that's most of my day. Any closing thoughts on type 4s, ENFPs? Anything you want to talk about?
I have one thing that is just me. I'm sure a lot of the ENFPs love it, but I love the stereotype of unicorns and rainbows and ENFPs being like that. I'm just like, I wear like, I mean, wearing right now, but I wear all black a lot. I live a very grunge aesthetic. I would rather be wolves and blood than unicorns and rainbows. And I think in a way it cheapens the intellectual of the NFP. People see NFPs as this bubbly-go-lucky, scatterbrained, me feelings person, and a lot of people dismiss how intellectually competent an ENFP can be. So that would be my big bone to pick there.
They're incredibly intellectually competent. I would say that's one of their main traits.
Yeah, I would say so too. And I think in type communities, I mean, ours is pretty good on Twitter in regards to this, but just in descriptions you read and on other places, it's such a stereotype. Like the intellect of the ENFP is disregarded often. So yeah. And then for type 4s, I think there's most descriptions of type 4s are good. I think they just miss the happy side of them. Like type 4s have a lot of happiness and joy to give the world because they're always seeing everything for this like artistic lens. And I think when people think type 4, they think melancholy, depressing, self-absorbed, and it's like, but they're also, you know, artists and they bring light to things. And
they're even known as like the romantic, and they see things maybe through a romantic lens too, that rose-colored lens, or like there's an artistic lens they see the world.
You definitely, as a type 4, just if something's boring or mundane, you can amplify it through how you just look at the world.
Wow, it would be so fun to be in your brain. It must be very colorful.
I don't know. A lot of people would like to not have my brain. Coming from a type 4 and mentally ill person, I would stay out, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I would quite happily trade my brain for someone else's, even though I know it's special in its own ways.
I feel like there's a very creative component to, like you mentioned bipolar, and I find that like there's a correlation with like massive creativity and bipolar. So like they say with your greatest gift is like your greatest curse too. So although it has like the components that you might not want, it also it's where your creativity lies. It's that like that like the artisticness in which you see through life through is also linked to that part of you that is also hard to live with, and it's beautiful like that. I don't know if like I don't know, like I think there's beauty to that chaos that it is in your mind, and it's almost like it's what makes you like completely and wholly unique. It's that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am more creative, manic. I watched an interesting documentary with Stephen Fry, who is bipolar, and he went around and interviewed bipolar people. And almost everyone, bar I think one person, when asked if you could click this button and your bipolar would go away, would you? And almost everyone said no. And it was because of the mania. It was because of the creativity and the highs and the productivity they got in that state. I mean, sure, that'd get rid of the depression, but yeah, I definitely see that. And also, in a way to comfort myself when I'm thinking about my bipolar disorder, is that no one else, unless they have bipolar disorder, is experiencing the range of emotions I am. I can go to places that no one's brain can take them unless they take psychedelic drugs, and even then it's not going to take them where my mind is. Or take them somewhere completely different. And yeah, I think I embrace that part of my bipolar disorder because I've gone to the dark depths and the highs, and it allows you to especially sympathize with other people and what they're going through.
Yeah. It's almost like you can put yourself in their shoes better because you can access the range of your emotions. Like each piano key, you have whole access to. I think there's 88. I don't know, but
my piano right here, I could count, but yeah.
Yes, we'll go. The rest of the episode is just counting.
1, 2, 3.
That's the part 2. But yeah, it's like that access to your full range helps you empathize deeply for other people.
I would rather have the insanity that mania and depression feels at times than be stuck in the middle my whole life.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's like, is it more torture to be stuck in the middle and to not have that beautiful experience, or is it more torture
The
to
healthier
have
I am, the better the middle is, because it's the healthy
Yeah.
state to be in. But if I'm unhealthy and then I go to one of those places, I almost romanticize it at times. Like, why would I want to be stuck in this boring middle ground where my emotions are relatively stable when I could be feeling all of this? Like, yeah. But I mean, therapists spend their time trying to keep you in the middle so you have a healthy life.
But I don't know, I don't know, that's so beautiful, like, how you explain your mind, so thank you for that, Alana.
That's okay.
Like, I feel touched having heard about, like, the intricacy of your emotional experience, and just, like, the like, your mind is so, like, freeing in how you see things because you're not limited in how you conceptualize things. And so thank you for like broadening my intellectual horizons. And I was so happy to have you on. You're very fascinating. You love philosophy and I love philosophy. So we got that going on. Yeah. And if you guys want to check out Alana, I'll have her links down in the description below. And yeah, thank you, audience members, for watching this far. You guys, your dedication to Tech Talks, makes my heart glow. So thank you for that.
I'd also say if anyone wants to ask me about anything, go to my Twitter because I'm on there all the time.
Yes, Alana is an open book. If you want to check her out, you can totally ask her stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, just thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun talking. Bye, guys. Bye,
Bye.
Alana.